What if I told you that at the height of the Roman Empire, there were not three, but four global superpowers? Rome, Persia, China, and a fourth mighty empire, a name most of us have never heard, Axum. In the 3rd century, a famous Persian prophet named Mani listed these four as the greatest kingdoms on earth. So why has this African superpower, a hub of global trade and a military force to be reckoned with, been almost completely forgotten by popular history? Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're rediscovering the lost story of the Kingdom of Axum, a forgotten pillar of the ancient world. Our story begins in the stunning highlands of modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, a land that was a crucial crossroads for millennia. This wasn't some isolated kingdom. It was the central node connecting the Roman Mediterranean, the Nile River, the heart of Africa, and the vast trade routes of the Indian Ocean. The very first glimpse we get of Axum stepping onto the world stage comes from a fascinating document from the 1st century, a kind of ancient travel guide for merchants, called the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. This guide tells us about an Axumite king named Zaskales. And Zaskales was not what you might expect. The text describes him as a shrewd businessman, always looking for a good deal, but also as an educated man who was fluent in Greek, the international language of trade. This tells us everything. The leaders of Axum were not isolated chieftains. They were cosmopolitan players on the world stage, ready to do business with the great powers. And business was booming. The engine of the Axumite Empire was its great port city of Adulis on the Red Sea coast. Imagine its docks crowded with ships from Egypt, Arabia, and even distant India. From the African interior, Axumite caravans brought a treasure trove of goods: ivory, rhinoceros horn, and tortoiseshell. In return, the elites of Axum imported the finest luxuries the world had to offer: fine Roman wine, colorful textiles, Syrian glass, and high-quality metal weapons that gave their armies a deadly edge. Trade wasn't just part of the Axumite economy, it was the entire engine of the state. The taxes and profits from this trade funded everything: a powerful army, a sophisticated administration, and some of the most astonishing monuments in the ancient world. One of the most fascinating stories about Axum's trade comes from a 6th century traveler named Cosmas Indicopleustes. He described a bizarre but effective practice known as the silent trade for gold. Axumite merchants would travel deep into the interior, to a land rich in gold they called Sasu. Upon arriving, they would lay out their goods, things like blocks of salt, iron, and cattle, and then retreat completely out of sight. The local people, who refused to be seen or speak to the outsiders, would then come forward, examine the goods, and place a pile of gold dust next to each item they wanted. Then they too would retreat. The Axumites would return, and if they were happy with the amount of gold, they would take it and leave the goods. If not, they'd simply leave everything as it was and retreat again, signaling that they wanted a better offer. This silent negotiation would continue until a deal was struck, all without a single word being spoken, a remarkable system built entirely on trust and tradition. This incredible wealth allowed Axum to do something truly groundbreaking for an African civilization at the time. Around the year 270, a king named Endubis began to mint Axum's own coins in gold, silver, and bronze. This was a huge deal. It was a declaration of sovereignty, a sign that Axum was no longer just a customer of Rome, but an economic power in its own right. And these coins became a powerful tool for propaganda, which leads us to the single most important turning point in Axum's history. In the middle of the 4th century, a king named Ezana took the throne, and Ezana lived in a world that was changing fast. The Roman Empire, Axum's biggest trading partner, was converting to a new faith, Christianity. Ezana, a brilliant strategist, saw an opportunity. According to the story, 2 young Christian boys from Syria were shipwrecked on the Axumite coast and brought to the royal court. One of them, Frumentius, became a tutor and advisor to the young prince Ezana. When Ezana became king, he made a monumental decision. He converted to Christianity. We can see this happen in real time on his coins. Ezana's early coins show the traditional pagan symbols of a disk and a crescent moon, but his later coins are stamped with a powerful new symbol, the cross. This was a genius move. By adopting Christianity, Izana instantly transformed Axum from a pagan trading partner into a Christian brother kingdom of the mighty Roman Empire, strengthening their diplomatic, military, and commercial ties. This conversion would forever shape the soul of the region, creating what is now the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the entire world. But Izana wasn't just a religious reformer. He was a conqueror. He turned his armies west and crushed Axum's main commercial rival, the ancient Kingdom of Kush, also known as Meroe. He sacked their capital on the Nile River, making Axum the undisputed superpower of Northeast Africa. The kingdom reached its absolute zenith in the 6th century under a king named Caleb. A crisis erupted across the Red Sea in Yemen, where a local king began persecuting Christians. The Byzantine emperor in Constantinople was worried, but his armies were busy. So he called on his powerful African ally. King Caleb assembled a massive fleet, launched a full-scale invasion across the Red Sea, and conquered Yemen. For a brief, glorious moment, the king of Axum was an emperor whose domain stretched across both Africa and Arabia. He was a global power broker, dictating politics on 2 continents. But no empire lasts forever. So what happened to this great superpower? Axum's decline was not swift, but slow and grinding, caused by the very thing that made it great: global change. In the 7th century, a new power exploded out of Arabia, Islam. The early relationship was peaceful. The Axumite king had famously given refuge to the Prophet Muhammad's first followers. But the Arab conquests fundamentally reordered the world. When they conquered Egypt, they severed Axum's main trade link to the Mediterranean. Arab merchants now controlled the Red Sea, and trade routes shifted, bypassing Axum's ports. The river of gold and goods that had fed the empire for centuries dried to a trickle. At the same time, the Axumite heartland was suffering. Centuries of farming and deforestation led to soil erosion and climate change, weakening their agricultural base. The kingdom slowly began to contract, to wither. The capital city itself was eventually abandoned, and power shifted south into the more defensible mountains. By the 10th century, the great kingdom of Axum was gone. But it didn't just disappear, it transformed. The legacy of Axum is alive and well today. It's the direct ancestor of the modern nations of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Its language, Gete, is still the sacred language of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, whose tens of millions of followers trace their faith directly back to King Izana's conversion. The kingdom's foundational myth, that the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon had a son who brought the Ark of the Covenant to Axum, remains a cornerstone of Ethiopian national identity. And in a powerful modern story, Axum's most famous monument, a 160-ton stone obelisk looted by Mussolini's Italy in 1937, was finally returned to Ethiopia in 2005 after decades of diplomatic struggle, a symbol of a nation reclaiming its soul. Axum's story teaches us that Africa was never isolated from the rest of the world. It was a vibrant, central player in the grand narrative of human history, a forgotten superpower whose wealth was built on global trade and whose legacy endures in the faith, language, and identity of millions today. So what are your thoughts on this? Were you surprised to learn about this forgotten superpower? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.